Hey everybody, welcome back to the Storytime channel. My name is Steven, and let's get into our stories of the day. You would like me to adhere to the contract? In that case, I require a hotel until you resolve all of these issues. A few years ago, I moved back to the city in which I was a university student. As I was now a young professional and had experienced significant issues with housemates in the past, non-payment of bills, having to do all the cleaning, I decided that I would rent a small flat from a reputable agency which specifically catered for young professionals such as myself. I went and viewed the property, which was quite messy and needed to have a few things addressed. In example, the vinyl flooring in the kitchen was ripped, one of the drawers in the freezer was broken, but seeing as tenants were still living in the property and the agency assured me that between tenants the landlord would clean the property and resolve any small issues prior to moving in, I happily signed a contract and wrote a checks for the deposit and first month of rent. 2 months later, I moved into the property and was welcomed with the following issues. Note, I just happened to stumble upon the list I made at the time when clearing out an old hard drive a few days ago. General: the entire property had not been cleaned. Fire door wouldn't close. Breach of fire regulations. The previous tenants had left much of their belongings behind, namely clothes and bedding. General waste was present in all rooms, bins had not been emptied, batteries had been removed from all of the fire/smoke alarms. By law, they were meant to be hardwired in rented property. Half of the light bulbs had been removed from the property. Hallway: main supply and circuit breaker ripped from wall, incredibly dangerous. Carpet soiled. Bedroom: slats on bed broken, so would not have been able to sleep on it. Mattress torn and ripped. Vinyl floor ripped up. Window jammed closed. Bathroom: fecal matter on light switch. Mirror broken. Toilet had not been cleaned, still had fecal stains in the bowl. Shower door broken off hinges. Vinyl floor torn up. Kitchen/living room. Washing machine broken. All drawers and fridge freezer absent or broken beyond repair. Gas cooker missing burner caps and pan rail, therefore unusable. 2 cupboard doors hanging off. Vinyl floor ripped up. Curtain pole ripped down. It was very clear that 2 things had occurred here. The first being that the previous tenants had done a bit of a number on the property, that they had not respected the property and had left quite a lot of damage in their wake. They did not even have the decency to empty the place of their contents, and at bare minimum, take the rubbish out before leaving. The second issue, however, is that the landlord had evidently not made any significant attempt to bring the property back into a habitable state prior to me moving in. Being the reasonable guy that I was, I called the landlord and asked if he could resolve these issues immediately, primarily as the property was genuinely in a dangerous and non-inhabitable state. I did not want to be rude about it. However, at the bare minimum, the flat should be safe to inhabit. The landlord dismissed all of my complaints and stated that his wife, he was on a business trip to Dubai, had inspected and cleaned the property a few days before and all was fine. A blatant lie. I told him that I was extremely unhappy with the situation, and he told me to adhere to the contract which I had signed. He subsequently put the phone down. Any sympathy I had for the landlord evaporated at this moment. He was happy for me to live in a dangerous property. So I went through my contract line by line and found 2 key pieces of information. 1, if a property is deemed to be in breach of fire regulations and or is deemed uninhabitable by a suitable representative, it is the responsibility of the landlord to resolve such issues immediately. 2, if the landlord cannot resolve such issues immediately, it is the responsibility of the landlord to provide alternative accommodation to the tenant until the property is returned to a habitable state. Fortunately, a close member of my family at the time was a fellow of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. Within the hour, I had a formal letter stating that the property was uninhabitable and dangerous. I had this emailed to the landlord, address helpfully listed on the contract. Within 10 minutes, I had a call from him arranging emergency accommodation at a local hotel until he returned from his business trip 3 days later. On his return, he drove directly to the property from the airport and returned the checks for my deposit and first month's rent to me and asked me to move out, which I gladly did. Unbeknownst to him, a copy of the letter had been sent by my family member to the housing ombudsman and the local authority. The last thing I heard is that the bloke ended up being investigated, heavily fined, and had to sell the house. I'm definitely with OP on contacting authority on this one. They wanted to trap you into a contract for years in a place that wasn't sanitary and wasn't safe. Also, why can't people just take care of a place they're renting? Do you guys have any tips on small things you can do to keep your living situation in order? Let me know in the comment section below. My simple thing would just be respect where you're living. If you make a mess, just put that effort in to clean it up. Ask an experienced worker to be more thorough? You betcha! So, the situation I'm about to describe is from a food service job that I no longer work at. I absolutely loved it at the time and was pretty darn good at it. Since I got promoted from regular crew to HR manager and third in charge of the store within like a year. I ended up quitting due to some issues with the GM, but that's neither here nor there. At the time of the story, I was a manager in training and knew my way around the store very well. I had the respect of my coworkers and of customers and got along with pretty much everyone. My specialty at the time was working drive-thru. I was working back at the first drive-thru window, which we called back booth, where the worker confirms the drive-thru order and collects payment. We had recently been told by franchise management that we don't ask customers if they want a receipt, we just hand it to them and they have the ability to refuse it. Seems harmless enough, but in this case it would have helped the situation. A side note, while most people took orders and cashed out drive-thru one at a time, I was able to do both simultaneously to cut down on time. A customer comes through in a large diesel truck, which anyone who's worked drive-thru will know it can cause issues with hearing the order. This guy had to shout over his truck what he wanted and then pulled ahead before I could confirm his order. When he got to the window, he pulled out his card and handed it to me before I could confirm again. As I was taking another order, I quickly walked him through his order and total while I was swiping his card, then continued to take another order as I handed him his card and receipt. He grabbed the card, but not the receipt, and continued to the next window. As this was common, I simply threw away the receipt to prevent clutter. Apparently, I entered one of his items wrong and he called later to complain and specifically said, "If she hadn't been talking to someone else the whole time, maybe she would have been able to do her job." My manager, who knew how I worked and placed me in the back booth for that reason, came back and let me explain the situation to him before judging. He then said, "How about you try and do things one at a time? That way you won't have any more complaints." A few things to note. 1. We all got complaints for stupid reasons because we can do things perfectly and still be wrong, because that's what people do. 2. Our company takes drive-thru time very seriously. If we went over, say, 150 seconds for a person to start an order to when they left our drive-thru, we weren't being fast enough. 3. My manager knew both of those things and placed me in back booth because, frankly, I was the best. I was able to multitask with little to no error and therefore extremely decreased our drive-thru times. But you know what? I said fine. I wasn't going to argue during a busy weekend lunch period, so I just did as he said. I would take an order, then confirm and complete the order at my window, one at a time, without any crossover. Our times tanked. We went from a happy 150 to 160 to over 400 with like 10 minutes. People began complaining left and right that their food was cold, they waited too long, why did they have to be parked for a 2-item order, etc. And once the times tank, it's near impossible to get them back up for a good 4 to 5 hours, especially on the weekends. My manager came back and looked at me. I maintained eye contact with him as I took a large order, then felt him watch me as I carefully went over an even larger order at my window to confirm and pay. I then looked over at him and said, "You said to do one thing at a time," with a big smile. Him, being a guy with a great sense of humor, just laughed and told me to shut the heck up and do my job. The times went down pretty quickly after that. No regrets. This is a good manager though. They respectfully suggested the tweak, and then when they realized it obviously didn't work the way they wanted it to, they allowed you to go back to what was actually properly working. Read it in French. Okay. I live and studied in a Spanish-speaking country, and since I went to public university, most of my classmates didn't speak English. By the time this story happened, I was fluent in English and French. For one of my classes, the teacher had a digital version of the subject's textbook, but he had it in English. The very first time he used that textbook in class, he asked me to read it out loud. It wasn't immediately clear to me if he wanted me to read it in English for him to translate later, or if he wanted me to read and translate into Spanish, especially since he had no way to know my English level, so I asked, "In Spanish?" "No, in French," he answered with a sarcasm. And that's what I did. I read and translated the whole paragraph into French. After I finished, I could see he was angry, while my classmates were mostly astonished. The power of a malicious compliance with language is so good. Being able to understand multiple languages, speak multiple languages, translate them. That's a powerful tool that can really throw some people off. Karen doesn't like me knocking? Okay, then I won't. I work for a parcel delivery company in Australia. I often get special requests from customers for how to handle delivery to their addresses, and they're usually really polite about it. So I try my best to help them out a bit. Today, after knocking on a door, it was promptly answered by a Karen who was not happy. You see, she was sitting rather close to the door and my knock had scared her. No big deal, it happens sometimes and we usually laugh it off. But Karen immediately proceeded to berate me on how terrible of a person I am for having knocked so loud when she was sitting so close, as if I'm supposed to know where she is in her house. If she was polite, I might have tried to work something out, and I still tried the diplomatic approach of apologizing and moving on. But she simply got louder and angrier. So loud that the neighbor came out to see what the commotion was. She ended up demanding my name and telling me she would be lodging a complaint about me. When I finished my shift, I was informed from my boss that the complaint had indeed been lodged. What I hadn't expected was that the neighbor had also called in to stand up for me and say that I had been verbally abused by Karen. My company has recently taken out a zero-tolerance policy on abuse towards staff. Because of Karen's outburst, we have all been instructed that to ensure no one knocks on Karen's door too loud, we are never to deliver to her house again. We are the only delivery company that services her area, and she is a heavy online shopper. Now that is a tough one. The only delivery company in the area, and she has to go and piss them off and end up ruining that for herself. I don't even know what's going to work out for her. I'm actually kind of curious how the delivery company would handle something like that. Let's say it's an equivalent of Amazon. They usually have that automatically set up for the delivery company to get whatever. If they have a delivery to that house, do they just hold it? I mean, what can they do? But with that being said, that's all the stories we have for today. So what I want to know is, which of these stories was your personal favorite of the day and why? Let me know which story and why in the comments section down below. And thank you all so very much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel today. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and don't forget to turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video from the Storytime channel. Thank you all again so very much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.